Untold Black Stories. Linda trespassed my pool again and again, so I gave her a lesson she'll never forget. Darius Walker had spent 15 years serving in the Atlanta Police Department. He'd faced danger, stared down injustice, and earned every scar on his body and every dollar in his pension. So when he retired, he didn't splurge. He invested, in peace. He bought the house of his dreams. A beautiful two-story home in a quiet, upper-class neighborhood with trimmed hedges, wide driveways, and a crystal-clear backyard pool. For the first time in years, Darius could finally exhale. Until Linda Graves happened. She first appeared like a shadow. A woman in her mid-50s, standing behind the upstairs window of the house next door, arms folded, eyes sharp. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just stared, long and cold. At first, Darius dismissed it. Curiosity, maybe. New neighbor stuff. But within days, her dog was running across his lawn. Then she started showing up by the fence. And not long after that, he caught her, right there on his property, walking around his pool like it belonged to her. No knocking. No asking. Just helping herself. It wasn't just rude. It was entitled. It was familiar in the worst way, the kind of behavior Darius knew too well as a black man, the kind that said, "You may live here, but this place doesn't belong to you." Still, he kept his calm. Years in law enforcement had taught him that patience was power. He didn't confront her, not yet. Because what Linda didn't know, was that Darius had faced far worse than nosy neighbors. And he had every intention of fighting back, just not the way she expected. Darius tried to keep things neighborly. He believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt, even when their behavior screamed otherwise. But Linda Graves wasn't the type to take a hint. The next time he caught her on his property, she didn't look surprised, or sorry. She was sunbathing on one of his lounge chairs, wearing oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat like she was at a private resort. Darius approached calmly. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his voice low. "This is my property." Linda barely flinched. She glanced over her shoulder and smirked. "Oh. I assumed the pool was still open," she said casually. "The previous owners always let me use it. We had an understanding." He stood firm. "That may have been their arrangement. But I'm the owner now." She rolled her eyes. "Right. Sure. I'll be out in a minute." Then she turned back to her magazine like she hadn't just trespassed. Darius walked back into the house, fists clenched. That day, he installed motion sensors around the backyard. But Linda didn't stop. Over the next week, she appeared again and again, early in the morning, during the afternoons, sometimes with a towel slung over her shoulder and a smug smile. Twice, she brought her dog and let it run near the water. Once, she even parked herself at the edge of the pool while Darius was still inside the house, as if she'd timed it. She was bold. Arrogant. And beneath her forced politeness was something else entirely, resentment. Every time she looked at Darius, there was a flicker of disbelief in her expression, as if she couldn't accept that this black man owned what she felt entitled to. Darius wasn't naive. He'd been a cop long enough to read people, and Linda read loud and clear. She didn't see him as a neighbor. She saw him as an intruder in a space she considered hers by default. Still, he said nothing publicly. Not yet. He collected footage. Logged every visit. Set up multiple cameras. He documented, because if there's one thing Darius learned on the force, it's this. You don't fight fire with fire. You let it burn itself out, and then you bring the evidence. But just when he thought he'd seen the worst of Linda's entitlement, she raised the stakes. One Saturday morning, Darius stepped out onto his porch and froze. There were voices. Laughter. Music. 5 women, dressed in designer swimsuits, were gathered around his pool. Bottles of champagne popped. One of them had a Bluetooth speaker blaring pop hits. Another floated on a raft, sipping from a red plastic cup like she owned the place. And right in the center of it all was Linda, waving at her friends, sun-kissed and smug. She had thrown a full-blown pool party, in his backyard. Darius stood frozen for a moment, watching the scene unfold in his own backyard. It wasn't just bold. It was outrageous. Linda Graves had turned his private property into a playground for her friends, without permission, without shame. One of the women was snapping selfies by the pool. Another was sitting on the edge with her feet in the water, laughing like she'd paid for the privilege. Darius didn't say a word. He stepped back inside, closed the door behind him, and reviewed the live security feed on his phone. Every angle. Every laugh. Every drop of champagne. The cameras caught it all. He didn't call the police, not yet. He'd been one of them. He knew how fast situations could be twisted, especially when the property owner looked like him. The last thing he needed was a viral video of him being mistaken for the intruder. So instead, he watched. It wasn't until one of the guests, a woman with bleached blonde curls and a loud voice, loudly asked, "Is the cabana stocked too, Linda?" that Darius finally stepped outside. The music lowered. A few heads turned. And then Linda noticed him, standing tall at the edge of the patio, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Oh," she said with a smile too wide to be real. "Hey there. I was just showing the girls around. Thought we'd enjoy a bit of sun." "In my backyard?" Darius asked. "Well, yes," she said, blinking innocently. "Like I told you, the previous owners always let me use the pool. I figured you wouldn't mind. It's just water, right?" That's when one of her friends added, "Honestly, this place is nicer now. You've really cleaned it up." A compliment layered in insult. Darius didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, he walked over to the side gate and opened it. "Party's over. Time to go." Linda let out a short, nervous laugh. "You're being dramatic." "No," he said. "You're being disrespectful." The women shuffled out, some muttering under their breath. Linda, red in the face but still trying to keep composure, shot him a look on the way out, the kind of look that says this isn't over. And she was right. Darius had spent years dealing with people like Linda, people who saw boundaries as optional, who cloaked entitlement in faux politeness, who never imagined they'd be held accountable. But now, she'd crossed the line. He spent the next 2 days reviewing footage, time-stamping trespasses, pulling stills from every camera. He had hours of evidence, some clear as day, others subtle but damning. Then, he had an idea. Not revenge. Not violence. Something better. Something smarter. Darius remembered an old trick from his police days, a chemical marker sometimes used in sting operations. Totally legal, totally invisible, until activated by heat or sunlight. It wasn't harmful, but it was humiliating. And it gave him a thought. If Linda wanted the pool so badly, maybe it was time she earned the consequences. The next time she came back, she wouldn't walk away the same. Darius wasn't just angry, he was focused. That weekend, while most of the neighborhood was still asleep, he walked to the edge of his pool and stared into the calm, blue water. It had always been a symbol of peace. A quiet escape. Now it was going to become something else, a lesson. He visited a specialized supply store just outside of town. The kind of place most people didn't know existed unless they'd worked in security or law enforcement. There, he picked up a small vial of chemical marker, invisible to the eye, safe for skin, but designed to react to heat and ultraviolet light. It was harmless, but once activated, it left a bright, blotchy stain that would take days to fade. He returned home and poured a carefully measured dose into the pool filter, making sure it was mixed evenly. From the surface, everything looked the same. Clear, pristine, inviting. Perfect. The next part of the plan was simple: wait. Sure enough, it didn't take long. By the following Saturday, Linda was back, this time with 5 of her friends again, all dolled up in expensive swimwear and giant sunglasses. They didn't even try to sneak around. They came in through the side gate like they owned it. Darius watched from his upstairs office. The camera feed showed them laughing, pouring drinks, blasting music, and posing for Instagram photos. Linda, as usual, was in the center of it all, lounging on a float in the water like a queen. Everything was going according to plan. The reaction started slowly. First, one of the women, Susan, scratched her arms. Then Bethany complained that her legs were itching. Kelsey, trying to rub sunscreen on her shoulders, let out a sharp gasp. "What the hell is this?" someone shouted. Darius zoomed in on the feed. Patches were beginning to form, pink and purple blotches on their skin, especially around the arms and legs. One woman looked down at her chest and shrieked. "It's on my swimsuit. My skin. What is this?" They scrambled out of the water in a frenzy, tripping over each other, some wrapping themselves in towels, others screaming about allergic reactions. Someone knocked over a champagne bottle. Another dropped her phone into the water. And then came Linda. She was the last to climb out, but the loudest to panic. Her arms were streaked with uneven blotches. Her neck had gone a shade of lavender. "It's the pool," she yelled. "Something's in the pool." Yes. Yes, there was. She stumbled over to her phone and began dialing. Darius knew exactly who she was calling. Sure enough, 15 minutes later, 2 police cruisers rolled up outside. He met them calmly at the door, holding a folder full of printed photos and video stills. "Officers," he said, "before you talk to anyone else, you'll want to see this." They watched in silence as the footage played. Linda entering the property. Her friends pouring drinks. The music. The laughter. The trespassing. One officer, Reed, nodded slowly. "Well, that explains a lot." The other, Alvarez, raised an eyebrow. "She's done this before." Darius gave a quiet smile. "She's made a habit of it. And now, she was going to pay the price." It didn't take long. By Sunday evening, Darius had finished editing the footage. 2 minutes long. No voiceover. No theatrics. Just the raw, undeniable truth: Linda and her friends trespassing, drinking, partying, and then panicking as purple and red blotches began to bloom across their skin. The security camera timestamps were visible. Their voices were crystal clear. There was no room for doubt, no angle to twist. He titled the video simply, "When Your Neighbor Thinks She Owns Your Pool." At first, he shared it in a private Facebook group for the neighborhood, mostly just to document the incident in case HOA got involved. But then someone reposted it on Reddit. Another person downloaded it and stitched it into a TikTok reaction. Within 12 hours, it was viral. Reddit, r/justice served, top post of the day. TikTok, hundreds of duets, reactions, remixes. YouTube Shorts, entitled "Karen Learns a Poolside Lesson," 1.8 million views in 24 hours. The comment sections were brutal. "The way she acts like she owns the place, classic entitlement. This is giving peak suburban villain energy. Not the purple skin. Karma really said, 'Let me show you something.'" But it wasn't just online. On Monday morning, HOA held its monthly meeting. For the first time in years, Linda didn't show up early to volunteer for the welcome committee or hand out complaint slips. Instead, she stayed silent while neighbors, some politely, others less so, discussed the incident. A motion was passed to formally revise the neighborhood trespassing policy. Another motion to restrict guest access to private yards without written consent. Both passed unanimously. Linda tried to defend herself online, but it only made things worse. She posted that she'd had a standing agreement with the previous owners, conveniently ignoring the fact that Darius had lived there for months. Then she claimed the chemical reaction was dangerous, despite confirmation from medical professionals that it was completely non-toxic and would fade in a few days. When that failed, she messaged Darius directly, demanding that he take the video down. He didn't reply. He didn't have to. Because the court of public opinion had already spoken. Loudly. Then the skeletons began to surface. It turned out Linda had been a problem long before Darius moved in. Several neighbors began to share their own stories. She'd filed noise complaints against children playing on weekends. She'd reported a black family for having too many guests during a Juneteenth celebration. She'd once tried to block a neighbor from installing a basketball hoop because it was lowering the property's image. She'd been the self-appointed sheriff of the block for years, weaponizing HOA rules and petty grievances to control the neighborhood. But now the mask had slipped. Even the people who used to nod politely at her in grocery store aisles began to turn away. Her smiles went unanswered. Her invitations ignored. Kids whispered when walking past her house. The HOA newsletter, which she used to edit, stopped arriving at her doorstep. Her social circle, once curated with care, shrunk down to silence. Meanwhile, Darius went on with life. He didn't make a sequel. He didn't need to. He mowed his lawn. Watered his flowers. Sat on his porch and sipped iced tea while watching kids ride bikes up and down the sidewalk. For the first time in months, he felt what he'd come here for, peace. But just as he thought the chapter had closed, Linda made one final move. And it wasn't an apology. Linda Graves had been humiliated, but she wasn't finished. A week after the video went viral, a sign appeared in her yard. For sale. No announcement, no farewell barbecue, no knock on Darius's door. Just the quiet, white flag of defeat hammered into the soil. The grass around it had gone patchy, like it had given up too. But before she left, Linda tried to rewrite the ending. She filed a complaint with the HOA, not about the video, but about unsafe chemical exposure. She suggested a new rule banning experimental substances in backyard pools. Only 3 people showed up to vote on it. All of them black. All of them voted no. Then came the neighborhood email blast. Linda sent out one final message to the community, a long-winded note about digital harassment, misrepresentation, and the importance of neighborhood unity. It ended with a quote about forgiveness, the kind of passive-aggressive plea for sympathy that was 2 months and 5 trespasses too late. No one replied. 2 weeks later, the moving truck came. Darius watched through the blinds as workers carried out the life Linda had built, box by box. Her patio furniture. Her ceramic lawn gnomes. A framed HOA certificate. The last thing to go was the lounge chair she once dragged across his fence line to sunbathe in his backyard. She didn't look at him. Didn't wave. Just climbed into her silver SUV and drove off without a word. And that was it. The block exhaled. A month passed. Then another. The house stayed empty for a while, the "for sale" sign gathering dust. But eventually, a new family moved in, Marcus and Danielle Hayes, a young black couple with 2 energetic daughters. Darius welcomed them with lemonade and a smile. The girls joined the neighborhood swim team. Every Saturday morning, they practiced in the pool, his pool, while their parents cheered from folding chairs. Their laughter echoed off the fences like the neighborhood was breathing again. The irony wasn't lost on him. The pool Linda once tried to claim had now become a space for community, for joy, for family. And not hers. Darius still kept the security cameras, but not out of paranoia. They were part of the story now, quiet observers of birthdays, barbecues, and block parties. They captured cannonballs and cake fights, not trespassers. One morning, he got an email from a local news station. They were doing a segment on viral neighborhood stories and asked if he'd be willing to appear on camera. He declined. He didn't need another spotlight. The point had already been made. Sometimes, the loudest revenge is silence. Sometimes, the best victory is peace. And sometimes, the real story isn't about the person who overstepped, it's about the one who stood their ground without ever raising their voice. Darius stood in his backyard one evening, the sun dipping low behind the trees. The water in the pool shimmered, clean and calm. He could hear the Hayes girls giggling inside. He smiled, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself. This is why I came here. Because in the end, it wasn't about the pool. It was about taking back what was his, not just the property, but the dignity, the respect, the space to simply live. And no matter how many Lindas the world might throw his way, Darius Walker would always have the last word. Thank you for watching until the end. Did this story resonate with you? Share your thoughts in the comments, we read every one and truly value your perspective. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, more powerful and emotional stories are on the way.